I don't know what's going on. There it is.
Welcome to the Demand Better podcast. In this episode, we are thrilled to have Eric Durak, a fitness and health professional with an impressive background. Eric graduated from the National Champions University of Michigan in 1986 with a degree in exercise physiology and kinesiology, and has worked in various capacities from personal trainer to clinical exercise physiologist. As the president and founder of Med Health Fit, Eric is a leading expert in preventative health, medical fitness, and wellness. Join us as we learn Eric's wealth of knowledge and experience in the world of fitness and health. Let's demand better together. What's up, Bo?
Just living the dream. That's not my walk. I got to turn it off because that's not my walkout music. That's Eric. Okay. We're having a hot spell out here in Colorado. You know, it's in the 90s, hundreds. All good.
I was up in Oregon this past weekend. It was about almost 90 degrees, and we've been just inundated here in Southern California with foggy weather for about 4 or 5 months. I mean, it's almost like crazy, but it's sunny and warm here today. Very nice. So, and I appreciate you guys having me on. So we'll get to it.
Eric, we're really, really glad to have you. I'll let Bo start off the question because this is a topic. Listen, this topic is hot right now. It's not just hot in the world right now, but it's also hot in the fitness industry. And a lot of people don't know really what to do with it. I will start it off that I believe there are 10 different drugs right now that are GLP-1s.
Exactly. There are 10 drugs in 4 categories.
10 drugs in 4 categories. Some work better than others, I've read. So
yep. So
let's start off with what is GLP-1 so the listener can fully understand what you're into, what you're working on.
Yeah, well, GLP is a naturally occurring peptide in the body that helps regulate insulin and digestion in most people. What's happened in the diabetes world a little more than 10 years ago is that they came up with a synthetic version of GLP that they wanted to help, number one, increase the amount of insulin. So the more insulin, lower the blood sugar. So in diabetes, that's a good thing. It also, since it's a glucagon-like peptide, it's actually sort of inhibiting a little bit of the glucagon from coming out of the liver in storage and getting into the bloodstream. So that's number 2. But it also works on the satiety index. Now, the mechanism I'm not sure of, but most people will say they just forget to eat for days. Okay, so to me, it's very interesting. I don't want to get into how and why and whatever of this medication because it is a synthetic form of a naturally occurring peptide. I would rather that we have the real peptide, but I understand that in type 2 diabetes, the issue is not that you don't have enough insulin, it's insulin resistant. And that's where exercise comes in. However, exercise for people who are on GLP-1 is, and I'm coming up with these theories literally, man, on a daily basis. It's like training someone who's ready to bonk in the Tour de France. And if any of you guys have ever bonked in an endurance run or an endurance ride, all of a sudden you got nothing. I've done this. I had an 80-mile ride one time, and coming back, I had about 10 miles, 15 miles to go. And I tried to get more water, drink more water. You got nothing. I had to get some food. I had to get some calories in there. And this is where we're dealing with the GLP. I like to call them patients, the GLP patients. So they're going to come into an exercise program. And you guys are familiar with being strength training and exercise professionals yourself, that if you want to maintain muscle mass in these patients, you're going to have to exercise at a certain percentage of their perceived maximal exertion. Now, let's say it's 70% of their peak effort. Well, they'll never be able to get anywhere near 70% because they don't have the energy in their system to actually do the physical work. They're bonking. They're essentially their electrolytes are low, their total calories are low, their protein to fat ratio is very low. Some of these people have not eaten for 3 or 4 days. So it's the job. Now, Dave, it was interesting that you said that we expect more from our trainers. This manual that I've produced is essentially telling trainers a couple things. Number one, you're going to have to get very creative with exercise prescription. Work to rest ratios, percentage of perceived repetition, working with a person's own, perceived exertion. And you're going to have to record all this stuff. Secondly, you're going to have some knowledge of nutrition, how much foods these people are eating during the day or days before, whatever, how much water they're taking in, and then and really recording that. And the third thing is understanding what their body composition is. Now, one thing that the fitness industry has over medicine is that most doctors will put someone on a scale, but we don't know what the body composition is. And, you go to these big health club conferences and you see InBody and Tanita and all these other body comp machines. Trainers are now in the perfect position to understand a person's body fat, their lean tissue, and their body water. And I say that this is not an issue of fat versus lean tissue. This is an issue of water, because dehydration is what's going to cause problems with organ failure. It's going to cause problems with heart contractility. It's going to cause problems with the brain, because as you both know, the brain needs a lot of glucose in order to operate. And if it's not getting it, there you go. And if it's not getting it, it's going to steal from other parts of the body. And it's not a good sign. If you're walking around, you might be able to do that. But if you're in the gym, the trainers are going to have to know this. So my big thing, and this is actually a water bottle. I'm gonna up you one here, Bo. This water bottle is from H2O Pal, and it actually has on the bottom, it's got a sensor. So it actually it'll go on the cloud. It'll tell you exactly how much water that you drink during the course of the day, to like the half an ounce. So they're going to need to know this, because they're going to have to be well hydrated, and we're going to have to figure out some sort of supplement or eating pattern where they're going to have a certain amount of calories during the course of a day. So when they go to the exercise facility, they don't bonk.
So I want to jump in with a couple things there. In terms of hydration, I have those stickers I just showed for the video audience, not the audio. But I work with Element, LMNT. Are you familiar with that electrolyte company at all, Eric?
I actually am. I think I put 10 electrolyte companies in the manual, because trainers are going to need. I didn't pick one.
Yeah.
I said, hey, this is the most important aspect, in my opinion. You're going to need to have some sort of an electrolyte packet or something to put in the water to make them want to drink or sip during the course of their exercise. Because
I was going to say, how do you feel about the sodium, magnesium, potassium balance of some of these in terms of the electrolytes on top of just water hydration? Because I think in these clients, patients, whatever you want to call them, you're talking about just water in general, right? It becomes a problem because they're just not even thinking about drinking.
They don't drink.
They're losing
eating,
that
they're
sense.
Not drinking. Yeah.
But in terms of that kind of bonking, and you mentioned bonking. I actually just completed the Boulder half Ironman, that was fun times. So that brought a lot of trauma to me as I was thinking about switching from the bike to the run and just and stopping at every water station. And there was they had I had my routine down, because I would walk as long as I could in that water station. And then I would get to jogging, but it was water, an electrolyte drink, which I think they had mortal hydration or moral. I don't think
I'm not familiar. There's so many of them.
There's so many. Anyway, but I would have the electrolyte drink. I would have a potato chip and an orange slice, and then another thing of water either on my head or if I was still thirsty, and then I'd get going. But yeah, that was a good 1 to 5 minutes of of catching my breath. But I did want to ask about that electrolyte piece. If you have any, you're talking about having those electrolytes, but anything about the sodium, potassium, magnesium pieces just in there, because something like liquid IV in Costco is half of what Element is. Element has 1,000 milligrams of sodium per packet. Liquid IV only has 500. So just wondering your thoughts on that.
Well, I don't know what the proportions are going to be for each person, because for a person on GLP, if they haven't eaten for days, they're going to probably be depleted in everything. So they may need the Element, or they may need 1,000 or 50. And again, a lot of them don't know. And here's the other thing that I want to bring to the industry in the next few months. With this course, And let me see if I have something behind me here. About 3 years ago, I wrote a course called the Blood Lab Wellness Specialist. And it was really something that the industry was not ready for back then. But GLP has changed the complete landscape of the industry. So if you get the GLP course, you get the Blood Lab Specialist course for free. I believe that trainers are going to have to know much, much more about blood labs and how they're going to affect both GLP patients and then their aging patients or their athletes or whatever. And I work with a few clients right now that use blood labs, but everything right now is venipuncture. And I'm working with a company. As a matter of fact, tomorrow morning I've got a call with a CEO who is in the process of developing the world's first non-invasive blood lab testing. So you get to wipe your sebaceous oils, and you'll be able to get through mass spectroscopy. You'll be able to get blood labs. So still in the second phase of it, but we're hoping to launch by mid to late fall, because this company's been in existence for a long time, and that's gonna rise to another type of blood labs. I really think that blood labs is something that health clubs in the next couple of years, most of them will have their own little version of a blood lab. And Dave, it's interesting.
Eric, let me jump in. You keep using that term. Just for anyone listening who might not be as familiar, can you define what that would be pulling out? Are we just talking kind of glucose levels? Are we talking much more in depth, vitamin D levels, that kind of thing?
Right. This mass spectroscopy can actually look at any type of molecule that has a signature. So you can do a lipid panel, cholesterol, triglyceride, HDL.
So it has the ability to do all that, and it's going to be between whether it's the practitioner, let's say, and the patient client that they're going to determine what it's looking at.
Right. If I want to get a blood sugar or an A1C every other week, I can do one test, or I can do 57.
And I
think right now it has the ability to do 57 components.
And it's going to be much more cost effective than trying to go.
Oh my God!
Yeah. Well,
right.
Remember, we know this. I'm just trying to
absolutely. We've already set the prices, but because it's still a lab test, I believe it's still going to be reimbursed on insurance as a lab test, and will probably be able to be used at any given time on a person's health savings account.
That's great. Yeah, I think I heard you mention that on another podcast. Dave, you had a question?
Yeah, no, listen, Eric, everything you're talking about is tremendously enlightening about these drugs. I'm on the opposite side of this thing. I'm looking at the trainer, and when I'm looking at the trainer, listen, there's a lot of trainers right now in the industry. The barrier, as Bo has said to me earlier today, the barrier for entry is very, very low.
Is there one?
That could be a certification.
Yeah.
But that being said, what's in the field right now is I wouldn't trust people that I see in the field right now in a facility with doing that with me. Now, I've been in the field 30 years. I just don't see the level of competence out there that is necessary. And listen, your certification might bring up the bar 100%. I just see a lot of pressure coming onto a trainer who I think at this juncture is ill-equipped.
I agree with you from the standpoint that the health club industry, and I've talked with a lot of sort of owner operators that want to get in just because it's Ozempic, and they're going to get a portion of those 80% of Americans who are not members of health clubs. If you get 20% of the 80%, you'll double the amount of people in health clubs. You'll go from 30 million to 55 million people, and they're all going to be on Ozempic.
And listen, and according to what I've heard, well, first of all, let me back up. Ozempic isn't even the best drug that's out there.
No, probably Zepbound is, from what I understand. Actually, from an efficacy standpoint, I just read an article in some, not medical journal, but some, general publication that they felt that Ozempic was probably the least effective in terms of the amount of weight people lost and the percentage of people who actually showed results, because there's a percentage of people who take these meds who have no change in their body fat levels at all. It doesn't work.
Yeah. So with that being said, Ozempic's the one being out there, being pushed out there. And from what I've read from you, Ozempic's the one that goes catabolic. You have trouble building muscle when you're on Ozempic. But the other drugs that you talked about, I don't have it in front of me right now, that you could build muscle while on these drugs.
Yes and no. I mean, I have inside information on 4 medical fitness centers across the country, 2 in California, one in, I think, Florida, and then a buddy of mine in Minnesota. And he's been in medical fitness for 40 years. And these people have all been working with Ozempic. I'm just going to say Ozempic type patients over the last 1.5 to 2 years. And it's almost impossible to gain muscle mass. The main thing in phase 1 is to get these people not to lose the muscle mass. So the balancing act is, well, let's not plan on gaining 6% lean tissue or muscle tissue. Let's not lose 12% lean muscle tissue. Yes. So that's the big thing. And then, the other thing too is that, my business coach is Bob Esqueri, and, he's a legend in the health club industry. He's been at it for 40 some years. And he and I talk about, discussing issues about nutrition, supplements, et cetera. And he's like, well, trainers should not be, prescribing supplements because it's out of their scope of practice.
That's exactly what David said on our pre-call.
Right. Well, but again, trainers don't prescribe anything. Doctors prescribe. Trainers recommend. So in the manual, I talk about what I feel is the best in class supplement, which is called Master Amino Acid Pattern, which digests out of the stomach in 23 minutes and has a net nitrogen utilization of 99%, which means if you take 5 or 6 of these tablets in the morning and 5 or 6 at night, you're going to get almost 100% absorption into the cells, which is going to be tremendously beneficial. Because I'm going to, David, come back to you. How does this thing work? It works not just by the insulin, the glucagon, whatever, but it also stops peristalsis from the stomach all the way through the large intestines. So what you're doing when you're stopping or slowing peristalsis is that this food is essentially rotting in the duodenum and in the small intestines, as opposed to rotting in the large intestines. So you're not really getting the absorption that you need. And if you're using up your water, this is a water medium. Digestion is a water medium. And to me, I'm just like, I get so frustrated with this, because one of the ingredients of all GLP and GIP medications is actually a synthetic form of venom from Gila monsters, which I speak in the book. And I said to myself, when I heard this on a podcast, I said, that can't be right. So I did some research on it, and in less than a day, I found out that this synthetic form of venom, has been used in medicine for almost 40 years. It was developed at the University of Toronto. And not only is it used in pharmaceuticals as almost an anesthetic for certain types of body processes, but it's also used in agriculture as a pesticide, and has been for many years. This is a thing. This synthetic stuff is all over the place. Yet, in my opinion, yet another poison hoisted upon the American people. But this is why they're having so many issues with that. There are 55 lawsuits right now against Novo Nordisk, and most of them are what's called gastric paralysis, which means that their stomach just cannot take this amount of venom that's circulating through their system. So, and again, I can't change that. I don't, I can't recommend something. There are probiotics that are GLP natural things, and I'm hoping that the industry will kind of embrace that in the next, soon, because I believe that in general, if I were looking at this from this 30,000 foot view, which I kind of already am, it's a huge opportunity for the industry. But Dave, your wisdom here is so important that the trainers need to be trained upward. Their responsibility just doubled by virtue of stating, I want to work with people on Ozempic. Fine, then you better know how it works. Because the first chapter that I finished for the GLP manual was on the legal liabilities.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to stop you there because that brings me right to where you want. Listen, you're a great lead-in because you just brought me to where we want to go. You and I are of the age where we remember fen-phen, ephedra, and in fact, you in one of your podcasts spoke about a death that you saw in New York Sports Club, and I can tell you about a death of someone who was postpartum that was given ephedra and died on the floor at Crunch. Way back. So, and that was this was postpartum, and then just to accelerate the postpartum to get you in shape, that pulled that all away. So, I, being as a 55-year-old man, been in the fitness industry for so long, you start looking at these drugs, and we've gone through them before. Fen-phen, the reason fen-phen fell out, it caused cardiac issues.
Right? Exactly. I don't know how many people had heart attacks, but enough.
Yeah. So it caused cardiac issues. As people are going into this, because listen, it's a certain segment we're really looking at that is going to be taking these drugs. The drugs average retail that I offer you was $959 to $1,500. So we're dealing with a certain segment of people. What makes us think that these drugs, and I know you know more, but I want you to tell the listener, what makes people that have gone in our age group now thinking about looking at Ozempic or whatever other one that we're going to look at and feel comfortable with it?
Well, my thing is lowest dose possible. Ozempic drugs, the class of drugs go from either 0.5 milligrams up to 2 to 4 milligrams. But from 0.5 to 2 is a 400% increase. So, or 200% increase. But to get the trainer's responsibility is to work with the doctor to see that these people can be on the lowest dose possible, and eventually to get them off in favor of other types of methods like the natural. There's a company in San Francisco that has a probiotic form of GLP-1. It's been around for a while, but now they're really trying to push it as the natural alternative to these synthetic drugs. So, I mean, I totally agree with you that, and I have all the legal documents in here as well. You guys have to really one of the things I read in the industry is that health clubs think that because you sign a waiver,
of course,
that they have no responsibility. That's not how it works in this case. This isn't the Patriot Act or whatever, the PrEP Act or any of this other stuff. Clubs who do not, because I've already published this, I already have this quote on the record that you're up to a higher standard now. So don't think that your liability waiver, as a matter of fact, I copied a liability waiver in this manual, and it essentially said that the club would not be liable for anything that the trainers or the nutritionists or something did. I got rid of that. I said, there's no way that can be enforced. Any lawyer worth his salt or magnesium is going to say, no, you guys already knew because there's already published works, et cetera, et cetera. There's already people working in this area. You have a higher standard of care. And I do think that the trainers you're going to separate the ones who can do it from the ones who can't do it. Do I think that Planet Fitness is going to have GLP trainers? Nope. You know who's going to have them? Equinox. You know who's going to have them? Lifetime. You know who's going to have them? World Gym. You know who's going to have them? The Medical Fitness Association.
But wait a minute. I'm sorry to interrupt. We're putting our faith into these companies. The Equinox, I can tell you for Equinox, you can train on the floor without a certification for the first 6 months of your work there. And what I'm looking at the client. So I'm not talking about the drug. I'm talking about, I have this conversation with Bo all the time about CrossFit. CrossFit is the exercises themselves aren't the issues. The people facilitating how to do those exercises and is why they get hurt. So we're putting because what's happened in the gym industry, at least in New York, they're pushing out the older trainers because they don't want to pay them as much. And you got a bunch of young dudes in there who don't have any experience. So I just want to make a statement in terms of, I don't know if the health club's going to look out for us. You know what I mean? It's not going to look out for the trainer as much. If you're doing the GLP stuff and you do the work, I get that. And I think those people will be fabulous. But I'm talking about the overall big scale of what these big companies are doing, because they're not keeping old trainers. Those trainers are being pushed out because they're going on their own because they're making more money. I'm sorry to be so long-winded with that.
No, and it's interesting because I see we have a new Planet Fitness here in Goleta, California, and I swear to God, the average age of everybody working there is 17. I don't even think they're even in college or whatever. They're college kids, young college kids just wanting to have a job because it's a nice place to work. It's a very nice place. But they don't really even have personal training at this club. And this is the issue. I think that they're going to become two classes of health clubs in the next few years. Those who sort of embrace the whole GLP and the responsibility of training their trainers up because of the legal aspects. And then those trainers that are just going to be here's a club. You're going to rent our equipment 3 days a week. So anyway,
Patrick agrees.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. So, we already have 2 or 3 classes of health clubs anyway. I mean, you walk into a Lifetime Fitness Center in Scottsdale, Arizona, you think you walked into a 5-star hotel.
Yes.
and again, so I don't want to compare this to pickleball, but I got to tell you that pickleball is one of the fastest growing sport in America.
Sure is.
And the injury rates for pickleball have skyrocketed. Okay, well, whose fault is that? All these clubs that want to, change their tennis courts into pickleball and all that kind of stuff. And of course, people will, exercise at their own risk. So we have that as an issue. What I'm trying to do in writing the manual is to say, listen, if you read this, I'm going to give you my 35 years of inside information and my early career working with diabetic patients. You're looking at the guy, gentlemen, that was working with diabetic patients who had no idea what the hypoglycemic effects of my training would be. I had a guy vapor lock right in front of me one time. And luckily we had a doctor in there that fed him some glucose and all that stuff. But I became very good at knowing what their pre-exercise sugars were, and then manipulating the exercise session based on the level of glucose. And so I wanted to keep it between like 150 and 250 for the exercise. And if it got down under about 110, they had a little glucose tab, or we did stretching or something that day, because I'm the guy. I don't want to say that because they shorten the course. I don't want to say per se that, that things are going to be really bad for the industry. But I do think that, my main goal in writing this now is to save that first person from vapor locking, in their exercise session.
Yeah. I mean, this again, David, to push back on your or skepticism that, as we did on our phone call earlier, is I think that we need to spread this message. If we don't do that, and again, I don't have faith in Equinox being like, hey, everyone needs to get on this so that we can cover ourselves. And let's all get Eric's certification. But yeah, I think that we need to, if we're not doing that, right? If we're not doing anything, even if Eric's just spinning to the wind, at least he's trying. At least he's trying.
Yeah, well, but the thing is that you understand that these people are going to jump on this because there's money there.
Yeah.
Correct.
There's
100%.
a lot of money there.
Yes, sir.
If you've got 13 million Americans right now who are taking some form of GLP, in the next 2 or 3 years, they postulate that it may be up to 30 million Americans. That's a lot of people who could be recommended to go to health clubs.
Sure.
And there are doctors who are recommending that they go exercise. Now it's the clubs. Pete Moore did a podcast about a month and a half ago, and he said, if I owned a health club in, Memphis, Tennessee or whatever, I'd go to every doctor's office and say, we've got the answer for your GLP-1 patients. They can come to train with us. We'll keep their muscle, blah, blah, blah. Well, they don't know that, but at least that's a start. But I'm going to make a comparison. 30 years ago, I started a program for exercise in cancer patients here in Santa Barbara, and it became one of the best in the nation. And I gave the reins to a young woman named Paula Lilly. When I left the club, and 28 years later, Paula is still working with cancer patients. I would imagine she's probably one of the best in the country that most people don't know because she doesn't go out and speak about it. But she's had probably 8,000 patients go through her programs. And when I started training them, I noticed that number one, a lot of them are cachexic. They have lost muscle mass because of their chemo. Number two, they don't eat very well or much at all because they can't keep the food down because they had a stomach cancer or any other type of radiation or chemo. It just knocks out their ability to eat well. And a lot of them are dehydrated because if they drink too much fluid, they have a tendency to spit it back up again. So I've noticed a lot of similarities, which I discuss in the manual, between cancer care and GLP-1. So, Dave, to answer your question about trainers being trained up, we have almost 20,000 exercise oncology trainers in the United States right now, working with hundreds of thousands of patients. And in the 30-some years that these programs have been available, to the best of my knowledge, there's never been a serious injury in millions of sessions. And it is one of the best forms of best types of exercise. If you look at arthritis care, if you look at diabetes care, weight loss programs, senior care, the silver sneaker programs, all these things have their place. But exercise in cancer has become such a thing in the oncology field that by 2025, which is only 6 months from now, the American Medical Association will have CPT coding that specifically speaks to exercise oncology. So if I'm a cancer exercise trainer, I'm going to have my own CPT codes. I'll be able to bill Medicare and private health plans for my exercise programs.
And we just had Jeff Berman on, who's a mutual friend of mine and Dave's. I don't know if you know him at all, Derek.
I met Jeff when I got into the field 30 years ago. So yes, indeed.
There you go. So cancer survivor. He shared his story here.
He's not a survivor. He's still living with cancer.
Yeah, he's an amazing guy. Amazing guy.
But he wrote a book back in the year 2000 about his experience of foam rolling and different exercises that seemed to help him. But that's the point, is there's this disconnect between, I think, what David's talking about and the fact that there's this gap in the industry. And so again, I think, Eric, you're trying to fill it, and we applaud you for that. To speak to that kind of a few of the specifics there. And I don't want you to give away the course by any means, but in terms of hydration, right? Traditionally in the space out there, are you providing some tools of how to track hydration? Are we looking at P color? Are we looking at just did you hit your number?
I mean, like I say, I actually speak a little bit about H2O PAL, but I also think that if they just have a regular bottle, so this bottle right here is, this is 750 milliliters. And if they drink a quarter of that, or 300 milliliters during my exercise program, I want to write that on my notes as a good trainer. Mm-hmm. And so that's another thing. So keeping track of all this stuff means that the industry is going to have to move into clinical outcomes, which I speak about in the book. About two and a half years ago, I worked with Weld Health, which is out of Charlottesville, Virginia. They're pretty well known in terms of having operations software. But I worked with one of their coding guys, Jeff Moriarty, to develop the Healthy Stats clinical outcomes software, which I now want to have as part of the GLP-1 program. So a club that wants to have this would be able to get the software. It's very simple to use for trainers: assessments, daily login of their exercise, and then post program assessments, and it all goes up to the cloud. There's also a gentleman in the industry named Rocco Boulet, who is almost a 50-year strength professional. And he developed a software program that is much more robust than Healthy Stats. And it also looks at blood work and some of these other things, but it goes into sets and reps and all this other kind of stuff. And to me, doctors have never been interested in the mechanics of exercise. They don't care how many sets you do. They don't care how much weight you lift. They don't care how long you've been on the bicycle. As long as you maybe adhere to the ACSM guidelines of 150 minutes a week, you're doing fine. My thing is this is not an aerobic question at all. This is bone strength. This is muscle strength. This is muscle hypertrophy, or not or keeping muscle mass from degrading so much. And it's also about functional ability. But the last thing I'm going to say about this is that I think that these programs, I think the health club industry, if they want to work with GLP-1 patients, should be looking at what I would consider from a marketing standpoint is a program for life. If you come in for a 30-week program for weight loss, you're going to be a member of this club pending you meet certain criteria for life. And, you know, Bo, you're probably not nearly as old as I am on this, but my father actually had a lifetime membership to a health club chain called Universal Health Spas in mid-Michigan back in the 60s. And I think he paid $135 for a lifetime membership then. And my mother almost killed him. She said, how could we got to feed the children? How could you spend so much money on a membership? Well, when he passed away 46 years later, I actually did some numbers on it. I think he was paying 48 cents a month or 78 cents a month for his membership. So anyway, I think that that's something, and I talk about program for life. You know, a lot of these big chain clubs right now are looking at longevity programs, and I don't see anything more appropriate for the industry than to take someone who needs to lose 100 pounds, get them into a health club program, but a health club mindset so they can be there 4 or 5 years down the road.
Yeah, I'll say this to you. I'm full, and Bo and I will speak for you, Bo. We are in full agreement of longevity. The whole concept of longevity and aging gracefully and moving as you get older to get better and try to get the best you can be. My issue, not even an issue, but you're dead on, in my opinion. I work with physicians that they are not interested. They are not interested. Just get them from point A to point B. This is what I need. Do this. I have some physicians here where I talk to them regularly when I'm working with a client, because I should have that connection with them and their therapist and anybody else who's involved with my client. But the medical field is, in my mind, is not interested in working with the trainers. I got in because they've known me. They've seen my work. We've been doing it for a long period of time. I discuss with them in their language what we're doing. And Bo does this also. Obviously, he's a doctor. But with that being said, I haven't seen the medical community as a whole really, really jump in with the trainer and say, let me tell you what's up. Because you don't get that. And I think, you know, according to your programming and what you're discussing, I love the idea. I absolutely love the idea of talking to the doctor, sitting down. Let's go over the patient. Let's look over my client. What does he need? What, blah, 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 blah. And we go through all of that. It's very rare. Yep. Very rare that I've seen it. And it's very rare that I've heard another trainer talk about talking to a doctor. Because when I got into the industry, I always thought I need to go see that orthopedic surgeon. I need to get into some family health care and tell them what I do so that I can get some clientele out of it and work my way through. What has ended up happening, doctors don't even listen to you. At least not, I haven't had that issue now as 30 years in, but you don't see that very often and very rare. Bo, have you seen that in terms of your practice?
Well, again, as a doctor of physical therapy, being able to work with from that, like, hey, I'm a physical therapist. So I saw your person after a total knee replacement. And then I'm also talking about these other things. And they're like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, you talk about, okay, you're that fitness guy. Okay. So I kind of have to go through the back door sort of fitness. And I have to put that DPT at the top to allow that conversation to be a little bit more legitimate. So yeah, and we were also talking, we're trying to get a few orthopedic surgeons on to get in deeper into that. But did you have a question for Eric from all that? Because I have another one I wanted to.
No, go right ahead. I think Eric's idea is great, but the physician's got to be amenable to talking to the trainers and working with the trainers so that we can get to the client to the best place that they can get. Period.
I guess the question there, if I can intersperse it back to you, is Eric, are you I think also within the fitness industry, I mean, is your goal to be able to get you said you're speaking at the IDEA conference next week. Is that something you think if this gets picked up by ACE or one of the bigger NSCAs or?
I'm going to be speaking with NASM while I'm there, and I started my education career consulting with ISSA, so I'll be speaking with them as well. And yes, because I never wanted to have a certification, especially as an individual company, because I've worked for many years and have been amazed by Andrea Leonard, who is the Cancer Exercise Institute. She's certified herself almost 80% of every cancer oncology trainer in the United States and abroad. And she's been doing it for 30 some years, and she's tired. She's going to be moving in a direction here, I think maybe in the next few years. But I'm interested in working with one of the bigger agencies. I'm speaking with an agency in Australia. I'm speaking with an agency in the UK, and I'm actually speaking with an agency in India. And I didn't even know that weight loss thing was a thing in India, but I guess it is. So, I'm hoping that as I launch the program full bore at IDEA and start speaking to groups. I mean, in September, I'm going to be in the Midwest speaking with some large health club groups. And that's what I'd like to do. I mean, I want to get a deal where 40 health clubs or 25 health clubs or 110 health clubs sign up for this program. And then we move forward from there, because that's how I think that financially it's going to make sense to me. And I also think too that I really need to spread the information. I don't want to be an evangelist here, but I really think that based on my unique experience in working with medical patients at the start, like I say, nobody did strength training for diabetes care until I came along. And we published a study in 1990 in diabetes care on strength training in diabetes. And I had guys in the gym. It's not like they had little dumbbells in some lab. I took them to the gym. And the same thing with cancer care. We were working in health clubs. And then the data, the research started coming out afterwards, the epidemiology research and all this other stuff. So they had the ability to look at things that we didn't, but we had thousands of survivor hours in the clubs over the first 2 or 3 years, which were very important for other clubs to know how to work with these people. So it's there. I mean, I think we're right at the precipice. We're sort of looking over the edge right now and saying, how can we really make this work? Dave, I am so on your side in terms of demanding more from the industry. I'm going to try to cajole them a little bit. I'm not wagging a finger at anybody. I've never told a trainer how to train a client. That's not who I am. Everyone's unique. I think that there are some breast cancer women that will get more out of yoga than they ever would out of a strength program. Absolutely. By the way, there's about 4,000 articles on yoga and breast cancer care around the world. I did a deep dive one day when I was at the university, and I'm like, oh my God, look at all these studies. This is amazing. So, and from longevity standpoint, I really think that some of these big clubs are going to do a combination of supplements, intravenous vitamin IVs, some of these other precision, compression sleeves, cryotherapy, cold plunging, etc. And I think that Ozempic clientele to stay at the club might want to take advantage of some of those cellular health and cellular regeneration things as well. And that's where I think the clubs are really going to have people stay for a long time. They just offer more than medical centers do.
Yeah, what's interesting is a lot of these boutique gyms that are popping up is what you're seeing, like these private training centers where trainers only, and they come in with their client. You will see a physical therapist on staff. You'll see a cryo center. Mm-hmm. You'll see all these little pop-up spots. It's in New York, it's to pay the rent and to make sure you give a one-stop shop to the customer. But what we're looking at, listen, I'm very interested in what you're talking. I'm just very I just see it on a smaller scale because these bigger health clubs don't have at least I don't feel like they have their eye on the ball. I think maybe you coming into the industry, maybe you explaining to them what's going on, maybe will open their eyes to them. But I have a question behind all this, which is with these drugs, is it a one size fits all in terms of them taking Ozempic, or does it matter? Is one drug works with everybody? Because I'm assuming we talked earlier that some of these people have zero.
Right, 15% of patients across the board have essentially no weight loss, no statistical weight loss by the use of most of the medications. Right. There's only one of the 10, which is an oral medication. The rest of them are an injectable. Some you inject once a week, some you inject once a month. So they all have a different, sort of prescription for them. And again, a person who needs to lose 150 pounds is certainly different than someone who needs to lose 45. So it's not per se a one size fits all. The doctors are trying to prescribe based on age, based on initial weight, and then based on any other contraindications and any other types of meds or whatever. The issue that I have is that the more you give someone, the higher the danger is over time. I mean, someone could be on a 0.5 milligrams, and they might be on it for a year. And okay, but someone who's on 2.5 or 3 or 4 milligrams a week or a month or so is at a much higher risk for higher levels of dehydration, higher levels of this gastroparalysis, higher levels of issues. There's a small percentage of GLP patients who have psychological issues. They're depressed. There's been a couple of attempted suicides. There's been, that's not very common, but they have to put that in there. That there are some people who have been very, very high levels of depression. And again, I think that in my observation of this is similar to other types of medications. We have the opioid crisis. We've had before that the antibiotic crisis. We've had, the fen-phen and all these other types of things where they come on the market. And by the way, Olestra is still on the market. I did not know that. But you can still buy certain types of food products that have a very small component of Olestra in there. And it's mainly so it gets out of the system a little quicker. There's a molecule in Olestra that won't allow certain types of carbohydrates to digest, so they just pass through the system. Anyway, I
had a bad experience with that, but I'm not going to share it here.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much. So, but like I say, we go through this. It's this cyclical thing in medicine that to me is very frustrating because and again, I'm going to keep coming back to how much I agree with you that trainers need to up their game here. All right. They've had to up their game with cancer patients because it's very possible that you could have a fracture. You could have a person who has some sort of a side effect of exercise if it's not done correctly, depending on whether or not they're still on chemo or radiation or an immune modulating medication. So anyway, you've got all of these issues that they need to know. And I think I touch on all of them in a 130-page manual. My manuals years and years ago were 500 pages. And I just think that, last week I shot a series of 2-minute videos that I'm going to be posting on social media when they get all produced, that the trainer can actually go through an entire series over a period of 4 to 8 weeks, and they can just get the bottom line on the nutrition, on the legal, on the mechanism of actions, on how what kind of strength training program, etc. I talk about each one of those in nuggets, and as I get going with my clients here, once we start getting half-day seminars and one-day seminars online, I'll be recording all of those, and that's going to be available to trainers as well. So
two things I want to throw at you as we're wrapping up here, coming up to the hour. One, and correct me if this is not in line with what you're saying, but I picked up on a very important piece here, and I actually had on my another podcast, an old friend Brooke Seam. She just wrote a book called May Cause Side Effects. She was on antidepressants. She tells her story for over 15 to 20 years, and to the point of becoming suicidal because antidepressants don't just get rid of depression, just like this. These drugs do not just get rid of weight and whatever that means. So one of the takeaways from her, and I also hearing from you, and if I could give one soundbite to any trainer out there, any practitioner working with patients, is ask the question. Great, you're on this thing. What is the plan to get off of it? Is that in line with?
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Have you been reading my manual? So my thing is that I believe that the trainers. I say this in the manual, I think a couple times, and I apologize. We've got some trash truck out here, but anyway, my plan for the industry is that trainers work with medical professionals to both scale down the prescription and then eventually get them off of it for nutrition, probiotics, and higher intensity exercise. Because I've read I get a thing, it's called MedPage Daily from the medical associations, and I'll read, every 2 or 3 weeks that there are some doctors that believe that once you get on Ozempic, you're on it for life. Well, who said that? Who said that you have to be on this drug for life? Well, it's probably good for business, but it would be a pretty short life.
Well, I'll throw in, I think there's and the same thing when we talk about medical doctors, right? It's, hey, don't squat below 90 degrees. Oh. Hey, wear these Hokas because you have foot pain. And you're just going to get weaker, right, and you're going to get worse, but it's short term. It's getting rid of the thing you're coming to me to complain about, right, and deal with the symptom. And again, we can talk all day about sick care, symptom care, versus true fit care, which is my actual business. I named it Fit Care because if you care about your fitness, you can avoid the healthcare space. And that's what we're talking about here. So yeah, I think there's that same piece there, right? That's the missing piece of you're on this drug and it's hopefully helping you. And you mentioned sometimes it doesn't even work, but when it is working, are you taking the time? I had another medical doctor, Dr. Nick, on my show where we talked about, and he was very much saying, hey, we still got to get people healthy. He's a big CrossFit guy. He's a big lifting guy as a medical doctor. And he's saying we still got to get people to build these happy, healthy habits, no matter what drug you're on. And again, we can talk about weaning off the drug, but if you're not building strength, then we're missing the boat. So I do want to ask you that again, and again, without giving away your entire manual, is the strength piece, are you encouraging just building muscle mass for everybody? Is it a one size fits all in that sense?
No, it can't be, because as I mentioned, it's dose dependent, it's initial weight dependent, and it's previous exercise dependent, because anybody who trained hard years ago has the muscle memory that, hey, if I do a certain amount of training, I might be able to do this. The only way that we're going to know this, Bo, is by doing regular body composition testing. That's the beauty of the industry right now. You don't even have to be the smartest personal trainer in the room or the most highly educated personal trainer in the room. If you've got a bioimpedance machine and you're doing regular testing of your clients once a week, once every other week, you're going to know what their body water is. You're going to know what their lean to fat ratio is going to be. And you can plan accordingly. You can prescribe your exercise accordingly. And that's the way I think it needs to go. All of this has to be outcomes driven. We have to understand that the assessments are now a part. And again, I'm demanding better of the industry. If you do nothing else, you have to do assessments on a regular basis. And the most important assessment, we're not blood labs just yet. Most important assessment you can do is body composition, because that thing is sitting in the corner of your gym right now. And I think that's an amazing, I worked, when I was at Michigan, I worked with Dr. Vic Ketch, who was a really big body composition guy back in the 80s and, through his whole career. And when I came out to Santa Barbara, I worked with a guy named Dr. Steve Horvath from the University of California, who actually worked in the Harvard fatigue lab in the 1930s. He was one of the first people. He worked with Dr. Benke in 1944 when they helped publish the first. It's called Specific Gravity of Men. It was published in JAMA. It's really the first body composition study that I know of. And these guys, they were all about body composition. And I said, yeah, but doctors don't care about that. Well, now we've come full circle. You have this ability to do this, do it right. And it's going to tell you a lot. It's going to give you a lot of information that you can do to be a better trainer for your GLP-1 clients.
I am, not to geek out a little too much, but with the bioimpedance, it's a lot based on hydration, is it not? And
absolutely, that's why I want people to use it.
Well, right, but isn't it going to show? Isn't it going to show lower muscle mass? But again, how much of that is the hydration piece?
You're exactly right, because once you get to either the higher end or the lower end, they're not as accurate. But I used to do a lot of bioimpedance testing in pregnant women. And when I was doing my research stuff, and I noticed that as they got into second and third trimesters, their body water would get lower and lower and lower, sometimes 50%. well, are they really that dehydrated, or is a lot of that fluid going into the womb right now for the baby? And so it kind of screws up how that, I always thought, well, as the womb gets bigger, the impedance actually flows around it, and you've got this big bag of water that it's not seeing. So you're right, there will be some, the accuracy will be a little off, but if we do it time after time after time, we'll at least have some. It'll be inaccurate, but it'll be consistently. And we don't know that yet because we've never really tested 500 people on Ozempic in a serial body composition study.
I just want to you're the only person, I want to commend you. You are the only person that I have heard discuss this drug, discuss working out, and discuss behavioral modification. Because there's nobody out there talking about behavioral modification, and that is one of the biggest components of this thing. When you get off, what did you change? Because if you don't change anything, my assumptions would be that the weight's coming back. But what you said with the behavioral modification,
well, the step 1 trial, they've done the step 1 through step 5 trial, and 4 or 5 years ago when they did the step 1 trial, they took I think 1,300 patients, put them on Ozempic or GLP-1, and they did it for a year, and they lost X kilograms of body weight. And then what did they do, gentlemen? They took them off of the drug, didn't do any lifestyle modification, let them go back and eat potato chips and whatever all day long, and they gained almost 90% of the weight back in year 2. And they said, well, see, they've got to be on this drug for life. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. These are the issues that I have. And by the way, I have a colleague, and I'm trying to find Dr. Mantell is I'm coming up here. Michael Mantell. He's out of San Diego. He's a clinical psychologist, but he's really, really big in the fitness industry. He may be at the IDEA conference in a couple of weeks, but he actually, I wrote a blog on somebody's LinkedIn page, and Dr. Mantell came and wrote in here some of the behavioral aspects that we're going to need to know. So I asked him if I can cut and paste for my next chapter, because I do talk a little bit about behavior mod, but I really need to have a whole chapter on this, because the exercise for life mindset of the industry is going to be part of that behavior. You're going to be a part of this family. We have cancer patients that have worked out at the Santa Barbara Health Club for years. Why? Because they've accepted them to be part of the health club community. They're not just a bunch of people with bald heads and scarves and, whatever. No, this program is nationally renowned. These people love to come. They couldn't afford to work out at these clubs, but we're going to make it affordable, whether it's through HSA dollars, down the road, insurance reimbursement. By the way, HSA will pay for weight loss programs right now. So that's another topic, Dr. Bo. So
I'm a big fan because my business can accept HSA. So let's get that out there real quick, since you mentioned it. India, 75 million obese people in 2024, according to a Lancet study. 1990, only 5 million. So quite a jump in a matter of.
Let me guess. McDonald's opened up.
The American diet a little bit.
Well, the interesting thing is we're seeing a lot of issues with food prices in America, and not as much beef, not as much eggs, not as much certain types of foods on the store shelves. But I read in Forbes or something about 2 months ago that McDonald's plans to open 10,000 new locations worldwide in the next 7 years. What are they going to do? Serve bugs? Plastic patties? I don't know. But the thing is this has got to be a part of the change. To give trainers credit, if they're recommending a protein supplement, a powder, versus McDonald's, you go to a hospital, and in many, many hospitals, you're going to eat hamburgers and French fries and a shake as part of your recovery. So I would rather lean a little bit. I'd rather give a little bit of grace to the trainers who recommend a protein supplement, as opposed to, I'm going to go to this hospital for a minor procedure, and the next day I'm going to have, breakfast cereal.
And this is a huge thing we've talked about. We've tried to talk about even registered dietitians versus nutritionists. And to your point, what is the standard American diet? What is the recommended In the hospital, you would think it would be a little bit differently versus, David, to your point of all these unqualified trainers, let's use that term, compared to a Thomas DeLauer on YouTube, who's talking about at least some research, but he's probably got 5 million views per video. So, where is this balance? Hopefully we're going to see the rise of better information day in, day out.
Well, I'm hoping that there's a shift in the industry with GLP. And I know that you gentlemen love this, what you're doing. Demand Better is something the industry has to look. And I may actually write, maybe David, you and I will put something together for the industry where we write something for IRSA, we write something for these major fitness publications worldwide and say the industry needs to demand more of itself because this opportunity is massive. And it's not going away in a year. It's going to be around for 5, 6, 7 years. So
Eric, I'm sure that Bo and I would be more than happy to join you because
the trifecta.
The reality for me is that my client's the most important person there, and I have to attend to their needs first and foremost, and I have to meet them where they're at, not what I want to do. A good coach, and like we'll use football, a good coach of football molds what he has to what he has. So if he has these players, he's not going to give them another system that these players can't work in. We have to meet our clients where they're at, and we really, really, really need to demand better from this because, as you said in the beginning, and I could talk to you, Eric, for hours. As you said in the beginning, I have less confidence in the medical field than I do going over to Dr. Bo and talking about something and let's figure this out together because the medical field isn't, in my mind, where it's supposed to be. Period. Full stop.
Yeah. No, I get it. It's sad, but it's the way. And like I say, I tell people the last 4 years that with COVID, the medical industry drove its bus over the cliff. And I just can't see that they're ever going to be back to the reputation, to the trust, to the financial integrity that they were years ago. And you know what? Good. We got 35,000 health clubs in the United States. They're growing at 7 to 8% a year. And I'm trying to get everyone to say this is an essential business. Well, the best way to become an essential business is to be the weight loss centers of record for America. And if you are, your doors are going to be open.
Bo, do you have any other questions?
I think that's a perfect place to end it on right there.
Listen, I have nothing else to say whatsoever. So, Eric, where can they find you?
Well, they can log on to www.medhealthfit.com and they can go to the contact page. But if they want to email me directly, it's durakfitness@gmail. DURAK. There you go. There's my GLP-1 page. And Durak Fitness, DURAK Fitness @gmail. And I'm more than happy to talk to anybody on this because, like I say, the reason I'm doing it is because I think that this is the consciousness shift that the industry has been looking for. And there are some pretty smart owner operators who are saying the same thing. It's like, hey, if we do this, we're going to be over here, and I think that's a good thing. I'm the guy I'm not the doctor here, but I'm the guy that has the experience in this, and we're going to get over this. We are going to demand better. And I think that we're going to separate the A+ trainers from the guys that just don't want to do it. If you don't want to do the outcomes, if you don't want to train these people for a long time, if you don't want to up your game as an industry professional, that's okay. You go over here. The rest of us, we're going to make this change in the industry.
Listen, I music to my ears. So with that, we're going to close this out. So a huge thanks to Eric Durak for informing us of these GL1 and sharing his inspiring story. Check out his certification. We hope it ignited a fire in you to act to demand better for yourself. Keep that flame alive and leave us a review, share the episode with your friends, and subscribe and stay connected on your path to greatness. We are sponsored by Fit Care Physiotherapy and Wellness, where the focus is to focus on your fitness so you can avoid the dreaded healthcare space. Remember, your journey to a healthier, happier you starts now. Keep pushing forward, keep demanding better, and stay tuned for more lifting content coming your way. Until next time, demand better, stay motivated, and always strive for greatness. Peace out.
Thank you.